welcome back. So today's another day, and as you may see, and I'll show you in a second more, my resurfacing concrete has set. It actually looks quite alright as far as I'm concerned, so yeah, let's just take a look. Yeah, maybe a bit too much sun, but yeah, basically as you can see, it's all set. It's really hard. It's more or less, well, it's pretty uniform color across the board, which is good. Again, as I mentioned, the wavy pattern here, it's actually kind of like it, so it makes some texture. Not that it was intentional, by the way, but again, for this application, it's perfectly fine. So one thing, as you can tell, it's quite a bit concrete fell into the joint, which was, well, that was almost intentional. I'll explain in a second why. So one tricky part, what I will have to do now, as you can see, because I didn't remove the tape back then, it's still under the set concrete, so that would be an interesting thing to remove. I think I can do it in a reasonable fashion, but we'll see. But outside of that, I'm happy with how resurfacing went. And let me quickly, well, not so quickly, elaborate on what did I do yesterday, which tools did I use, and how did it go. So the thing what I mentioned yesterday, what we were using, is this. So that's a Sakrete Flo-Coat. It's a concrete resurfacer, and that's the 18 kilo bag, or I think it's what's 40 pounds. And for that you just mix it in a bucket as usual with the drill. I did it before, just with a different compound. Used 3.3 liters of water, and that was actually quite fine. I mean, the consistency was pretty much what I expected. It's supposed to be kind of pancake batter consistency, so you probably have seen it flowing when you pour it from the bucket. Now, the reason for many things what I did yesterday is as following. Check a look at that. Alright, so it says final set time 3 hours. Well, that may or may not be true, but the thing is with these compounds, and pretty much all the flowable resurfacers are like that, they actually set, as in like working time is really short. And by working time I mean the time that it actually flows. You can shape it, not to the final form, but in a way as it's supposed to work with a squeegee, like they have it here on the picture. So, and that working time really depends on the temperature and humidity around, and that's when this whole project wasn't exactly, well, didn't have exactly a great timing. The reason being, we had and still have extremely high temperature here pretty much every day. We're talking about 30 degrees for the metric folks, and that would be what, 90s for our imperial friends. So yeah, that's pretty high for concrete. And the thing is, these compounds really start to get dense, stop flowing, and actually set within a matter of minutes. We're talking about, well, maybe 15 minutes working time, depends, but it's basically very, very short. So what that means is, once you mix it, you have to right away pour it out and spread it out, shape it to the extent you can and want to, and then basically you are either done, like it was in this case, because that's a fairly small pad here, it's like there's not much to it. One bag was more than enough. If you have more surface area than that, Well, that's actually a problem for, well, I mean, at least if you don't know exactly what you're doing, because you can't just stop after doing one bucket or one bag and go pour or mix some more and pour it again, because you're going to have cold joints and things like that, because the previous compound would set by that time. You won't have wet edge anymore, or at least it won't be as wet as it used to be. So if you want to use these compounds for something bigger than that, you really need to have more than one person, probably more than two. So one would be on the mixing job, another one for spreading, pouring, and so on and so forth. So that becomes a pipeline. So that's good for professionals, not so good for DIY, especially people who do work by themselves, and especially bad for people who work in the weather that I was working with here. So that's kind of a lot of excuses, but it's real. This thing sets really fast. So once mixed, and it doesn't take a lot, the mixing went fine, as I said, so I did pour it out. It did pour out, actually. I expected that I had to add more water to make it more flowable, but that wasn't necessary. It did flow initially very well. And then you're supposed to use squeegee, and I have this ginormous squeegee here, like this. Alright, that's a squeegee, just a rubber piece here. And yeah, you just spread it out. Well, okay, so let me just put the camera back on the tripod. So I can show some things with two hands. So okay, so that's the rubber edge, and yeah, I didn't put the poles, but I have the poles for the squeegee and the broom. Yeah, you just continue spread it out. Well, the squeegee only works with this compound for a very short period of time before it starts to get. It doesn't solidify yet, but it doesn't exactly spread out easily. And part of that's the reason for this wavy structure, because then the squeegee starts to jump a little bit, and that's kind of thing that you get. So, but still you need to have a full coverage, and that's the squeegee job basically. So I had to go very quickly and spread it out as much as I can. I didn't know at that time yet if I'm going to be doing this, the border piece. I did it at the end, but I didn't know, so I started just on this piece. And I knew I'm gonna mix more concrete than I really have to use, because I prefer to err on the side of more than needed than less than needed, because as I said, I really won't be able to mix some more without this being very obvious. But actually, in all fairness, the amounts that I poured wasn't that significantly more than I had to. I mean, quite a bit obviously ended in the joint, which I'll have to remove now, but by and large that was kind of okay. So spreading it out was more or less okay, but not as smooth as you would expect from kind of squeegee. And again, that's what I've seen in other videos and whatnot. So the recommendation was to use the broom, the concrete broom, to eliminate the squeegee marks and whatnot. So they have two of them. So that's actual broom. You attach the pole here, and then you can broom your freshly poured concrete. And usually that's done to actually make these broom marks to create a texture so the concrete is not slippery. In this case, and yeah, that's where you have a pole, and it's like 2 feet wide, so it's actually, you can use a significant area and whatnot. It's fairly soft actually as well. So that didn't really work that well. I mean, I could brush it a little bit, but I didn't really spread things as well. I mean, I did a little bit. And the angle, I mean, it was yeah, not a great tool for this particular job, and it started to get too soft for the setting concrete as well. So I quickly abandoned that part and switched to the next tool that you can use to shape concrete, and not just the resurfacer, and that's the trowels. So I have two of them. You already seen this one, the small one, that I used to work with this piece, and just to scoop concrete from the bucket and whatnot and shape it here. But for large flat areas, you want to use something like that. That's about 18 inch. That's a finishing trowel. And yeah, like the bigger they are, the flatter you can make the surface. And that's when you can go and you could see me spreading it out and making it flat and filling in all the gaps that actually Squeegee did not fill, which was quite a few. It turns out the concrete below was a bit more pitted than I could see, and some of the things just kind of absorbed the concrete mix and literally didn't have enough, so I had to refill, trowel a little bit, and yeah, basically that was kind of the intense part of the operation. But yeah, so that's what I used, finishing trowel. And then I don't remember exactly in which order, but basically with the remaining concrete, actually I figured that I have enough to cover the border piece here. So I dumped it on, worked with a smaller trowel here because this one is way too big for that, and also used my edger, which I already used last time, to cut the edge on both sides to the extent I could. I used this random piece, that's like a plastic combination tool. Normally you wouldn't want to use plastic tools to work with concrete, because once you scrape over aggregates and whatnot, the edges getting really chipped very quickly. So it doesn't, yeah, it's not good anymore. That's why I usually use metal tools for that. But here I was mostly using it to either just spread it out or just put the, cut the joints. So that worked fine. And then I spent quite a bit of time with a different masonry brush, like this one. This one is actually a little bit more rigid than the big one, and was definitely a lot more convenient for me to handle the smaller pieces. So I brushed the heck out of the remaining surface here, and while it was starting to set, that also worked well for having the brush marks here. I mean, you may not see it, definitely see here and whatnot, as well as spreading out the remaining irregularities to the extent I could. And that's how it kind of went. So basically, yeah, the last piece I had to kind of like scoop it in, shape the edge, brush it, repeat it a few times, and as such a lot of the compound ended up on the joint, and that was expected because I didn't have time to work carefully, so I knew I'm going to be dumping stuff in the joint and then have to recover it afterwards, and that was fine. So from that perspective, it kind of went according to plan, more or less. Didn't went worse than I expected, didn't went much better than expected, so pretty much par for the course. Now, the last piece I will mention here is the taping. So not necessarily the greatest setup, again kind of expected, because right now tape is under set concrete, so taking it out would be an interesting proposition. Usually when you deal with something like paint or similar things, you tape, you paint, then you take the tape while the paint is still wet, or it just started to set, and then you take it out, so you can actually pull the tape without pulling the paint, or concrete in this case. You can do it the same with concrete, but it's harder to do because it's much more dense. I definitely couldn't do it while it was setting, because A, I didn't have time, B, the way I taped it would basically necessitate pulling the whole tape, so that wasn't a great setup for sure. So I figured I'll just leave it as is and then handle it later when it's all set, and we'll see how that goes. So yeah, that's that. There was a lot of cleanup afterwards, as usual, working with concrete and cleaning the tools, buckets and whatnot, but hey, it's all done for now. This part looks fine to me. Again, it's definitely not perfect by any means. So now I'll need to clean the joint, remove the tape, making sure it's all looking good. And again, if that works fine, which hopefully it would, then the next steps would be to fill the joint with sealant, and that should be kind of it. So with that, I'll see you next.